thank you both for coming. Edwin, let me start with you. My very first question to you is, what does sustainability mean to you?
Well, thank you. To me, sustainability means that meeting the necessity and the needs of the present generation without jeopardizing the necessity and needs of the future generation.
Absolutely. And you are the future, so I'm sure you are looking to us with the commitments that we're making to secure your future. Thank you. Marianne, what does sustainability mean to you?
I get that sustainability means that we're meeting our needs without compromising the needs of the ability of the future generation from meeting their own. But I think sustainability is also understanding that social equity and economic development are interdependent.
Yeah. Can we give them a round of applause? You better watch out. These are the ones who will be sitting in your position making the decisions that you are. Thank you both for that, and we'll have you ask your questions as well to our guests this morning. Peter, let me come to you now. We're coming out of a pandemic and we're looking forward to building better and seeing what happens beyond the pandemic. We have the mics that are right next to you. I believe they're on and will be when you begin to speak. So my question to you is that, governments and businesses are now going to be investing, millions, billions, even trillions of dollars in terms of building back better and restoring our societies, possibly to what they were pre-COVID. But how do you navigate that, very delicate balance between doing that and, of course, looking towards the future?
You're right, Yvonne, that of course the governments across the world, including in this country, are spending significant amounts to allow us to recover from COVID. We know that COVID has derailed a lot of plans, both at an individual level but also at a corporate level. And it is fair and natural to start managing risk and focusing on the short term. But also COVID has also underscored the need to use this crisis to recommit to the long term. And there are a number of learnings that we can take from the experience that we've had over the past year and a half. And there are a couple of things that we need to do to build back better. And there are three that I wanted to mention. One is collaboration. We saw that during COVID, it is tempting sometimes to compete, but we saw everyone coming together. At a corporate level, we came together with government to support the country, to come together to really prevent or reduce the spread of the virus, but also to support the country. The second is, of course, leading from purpose. We realized that it is important to deliver profits, and that's what we are here for, to deliver returns to our shareholders. But by leading from purpose, we know that we cannot operate if our society doesn't recover. And therefore, we came together to ensure that we keep the country connected, for example, at Safaricom. And it's important to really always realize that doing good is actually is good for business. And the third one, of course, is what we are talking about today. The SDG gives us a moral compass for us to commit, to focus on the future. So we can it is not about focusing on the present, it's about a balance between managing the risks that we see today to build a more sustainable and resilient business and economy into the future.
Indeed, thank you for that, and it's obviously a delicate balance because you want to perhaps look in the short term and start to rebuild what you have, and as well recommitting to the goals of sustainability, which are more long-term. So Kariuki, let's talk about that long-term sustainability. With everything that happens in an economy, and you're trying to build an economy back and build it better and make it successful. In the span of doing that, a lot of times, the most vulnerable and the ones who need it are left behind. So my question to you is, what can corporates do to make sure that everybody has access to the basic needs? Education, I'm sure my two co-moderators are looking forward to hearing your response on that. Food, water, and healthcare, how we are recommitting to the long term, even as we manage what has obviously been a challenging year that none of us have been through before.
I think there are a couple of things. When you look at to ensure that no one is left behind. When you talk about sustainability and the response from the panelists, the students, the future leaders, is really telling. It's how do you make sure that what we are doing today, 50 years from now, the generation that will be alive then, or even 100 years, will be enjoying, they'll actually be enjoying what has been left behind. And because that's what we are doing today as a country. Mm-hmm. And so for me, what I look at today is, first of all, the corporates at this very moment is to realize that there's a real challenge, that the climate risk is real, and we have to do something about it. So it's a question of making sure that in our planning that we do, we are very conscious of that, and we are deliberately taking action to do something about it. On the issue of the vulnerable populations, what COVID has clearly demonstrated is that the most vulnerable people get the most affected. Even when you look at the economies we live in, when you look at vaccines, what's happening today, it's very clear that if you're poorer, the access to vaccines is quite limited. And that's so we have to be very deliberate. If we really want to have corporates that are sustainable, the corporates are earning share, they are giving returns to the shareholders, so that this generation can continue reaping from those corporates. This generation can get employed in those corporates when they finish their schooling. Then you have to be very deliberate to make sure that you are supporting the environment, the society, so that it continues being sustainable. In that way, you have to help with the education system, whether it's the linkages that you've got to have with the education system, so that you're helping the education system be relevant. And then you are deliberately going out of your head to say, how can I help? How can I be relevant? What are the key things that they need to be part, so that they can be part of this change that is happening? And then finally is, how do you create awareness? I think corporates have a big responsibility in creating awareness. When you look at our company Standard Chartered, or even a company like Safaricom, in terms of the reach and the credibility of their messaging, it's very important to create the awareness. And that awareness, when the general population is aware, when people are aware, they are prepared. And once people are prepared, they're able to do something positive. When you talk about, if you take as an example in Kenya today, it doesn't take a lot of reminding for people to plant trees, because the awareness is there. The awareness has been created. People can see the advantages of trees. So that awareness is what makes a difference. So, and that way, it's very, very important, because once you create the awareness, then the most vulnerable parts of your population will not be left behind, because that's the worst mistake we can do as corporates, or as a society, or as communities. You should never leave anyone behind.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, leaving no one behind. And you talk about, creating awareness and credibility of messaging, that I guess is also important. But of course, all of this, rests and begins with leadership. So, Ngwing, what are those conditions that are required for leaders to start to create long-term sustainable conditions for that? And how can we start to create those conditions for leaders?
As I was listening about the report and having read the report, there are so many things that Safaricom is doing towards their sustainability journey that ordinarily a business would think that it is impossible to achieve. Mr. Ngari mentioned earlier about being a champion, about businesses creating awareness. And I would say it is going beyond creating awareness of the dangers, but also being a peer influencer to say, okay, this is what Safaricom is doing. Can Standard Chartered do? Can another corporate also do? It creates that will to join the leaders in creating change for the future. At B-Lab, what we do is we create standards for businesses to follow. So a lot of times, a business might be hearing this issue about sustainability and not know where to begin. So in partnership with the UN Global Compact, we created a tool called the SDG Action Manager tool, which is essentially a blueprint for businesses to use. And the tool is absolutely free for any size of business to use. So a leader in a business can't get up and say, I don't know where to start, okay, because there's guidance out there to follow. And one of the other things to think about as a business is, what am I contributing to the society besides government? So government is there to create policies and create social services, etc. But government can't do it alone. When you think about business is a touch point for everyone. You're either buying from a business is supplying to you, you're interacting with a business, or you're a business owner, okay? So if you embed sustainability practices in your day-to-day operations as a business, you are going to, by virtue of your existence, be on the journey towards sustainability. So as a leader in the business, you have to be thinking about what is my impact on my customers? As Safaricom has shown in the sustainability report, that is at the forefront of its foundation. What is my impact on my workers? Because oftentimes, as a business, we think about this thing called shareholder profit, giving to the shareholders so that the business can be sustainable. Well, if we think about the shareholders only, our business will fall. Because it is not only the shareholders' profit that causes your business to remain working. So as a leader, you want to think about all your pillars. How are you influencing the environment? How are you influencing your customers, the community in which you operate, and your workers, but more importantly, your governance. Because as Mr. Ndegwa is here today championing sustainability, Safaricom is fortunate to have had leaders over the last 10 years who are on the same path. But what happens if new leadership comes and that's not the journey that they want to do? So once you put it in your legal structures, someone else can't come and change it. So those are the types of things that leaders can begin to think about. What is the legacy that they are leaving in the business to make sure that it transcends, this whole sustainability journey transcends beyond them. And then to rally their peers so that they are not walking on this journey by themselves. They are standing together and going beyond, as Safaricom is doing. And who are they standing together with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And that's a great way to put it. Like we've said, it's a collaborative journey. And I think for every year that Safaricom has launched its Sustainable Business Report, there's always been others invited across the corporate sector because, like you said, you work together, you challenge each other as peers, and you see areas of collaboration with respect to this. And also, just to reiterate what you said about creating standards, because like what we heard earlier a little bit from Karen, what you cannot measure, you cannot improve. And it's also important that you mentioned government. We'll be hearing from the Cabinet Secretary who is here with us today. Thank you. And as well from the UN Resident Coordinator in a moment. I'm seeing your questions. Keep them coming in. Please use the Q&A tab for that. And of course, all of the good things that are being said here, feel free to share. The hashtag is Sustainable Safaricom. Those are my questions. I know you definitely have some questions. Marianne, let me start with you. What's your question? And who were you directed to?
My question would be directed to Mr. Ndegwa. So what values do you focus on when you're achieving an equilibrium between the two P's, purpose and profit?
I knew I was going to get a tough question.
From a tough young lady.
Yes, thank you, Marianne, for the question. I suppose, values are about how we are brought up, kind of how we were educated, what our parents and our society wants us to be. I went to Starehe Boys, not sure whether that's the reason why Edwin is around. And I remember the values around integrity, doing the right thing, serving society. I still remember when I was in fourth form, going as part of our education program, going to serve at a hospital in my county. And that still is present in my mind in terms of giving back to society because of what the society has given us, especially around education. So in the corporate world, in terms of thinking about society, our business, Safaricom, is about transforming lives. And we believe, and this is why I said, doing good is good for business. If we transform lives, our customers will be better, our society will be better, our stakeholders will be better. Therefore, we'll make more profits. Our customers will be happier. So it is not about a conflict. It is actually that, and I think it's what you said when you introduced. It is about going for something that allows us to have a business in a more sustainable way and live a better society for the future generation, including yourselves.
Thank you, Peter. Edwin?
Thank you. My question goes to Mr. Kariuki Ngari. Well, gender-based inequality has been pervasive in both today's world and in traditional world. What is your organization doing to make sure that you meet gender equality?
Thank you. Very, very good question. The first thing that we've done at Standard Chartered is being very deliberate about it. As you've heard the various speakers have spoken about, you must have the measurements. How do you measure? You must have goals. Otherwise, without the goals, then you cannot meet them. You don't know where you're going to. So we've got very clear measurements, especially whether it's at the board level, at the executive level, and the general population, the general staff population. So when you look at the general population for us, for instance, we are 53% female, 47.6 male. However, that turns around when you come to senior management. When it comes to senior management, it flips the other way, especially, and we call them the higher grades, where you start finding the females drop off, they start hovering around 35 to 40, and the male move to 65 to 70. And then the ExCo, that's the executive team. That's so we have to be very deliberate and say, what's happening? What is happening? Why are people falling off? And what then do we need to do? You've got to have those targets, and then you've got to take measures, interventions, so that you can prevent the falling off from happening. And then being very focused and look, what are the things, whether it's, and then the policies you create that. If I can just give an example, where for a lot of females, when they start a family, they take a career break. Either they can take a proper career break where you're completely stay away, or you're no longer as engaged. When jobs are advertised, you don't apply for them. So it's being very deliberate to encourage them and making sure that we are not, even if you take a career break and you come back, you will not be discriminated against. That is very, very important. Then being very deliberate about the interviewing process. We are very deliberate in the interviewing process. There's nobody who just takes a job just like that. Everything is advertised. Then you have to deal with unconscious biases. Because if you have unconscious biases, if it's an all-male panel, let's assume all-male panel from one part of Kenya, they are most likely going to, when a female comes in, they'll say, no, this one we can't touch. So you've got to start dealing with those unconscious biases that impede the right decision making. So very deliberate training on our people managers and our people to make sure that we train them. What are the unconscious biases that you need to look out for? How do you make sure that the panel is balanced and people are very, very balanced? I just thought I'll give those two examples that we are very deliberate, because the journey to gender equality in the workplace, it's a journey. It's not something you can just achieve very, very quickly. And you have to be very deliberate, you have to be persistent, and you have to believe in it, and you have to keep on pushing that agenda until one day it will flip. Maybe in 100 years, we'll be dealing with the other way around. It will be more of the boy child, not the girl child like we are speaking today. Thank you.
Absolutely. And it's about, being intentional from the onboarding process and throughout, their time within the organization. Marianne, you've got another question?
Yes. So my last question would be directed to any of you. What has prompted you to focus part of your resources to sustainability projects?
If you think about it generally, if we are not deliberate about sustainability, in 50 years, what happens to the world and what happens to your future, right? So for me, my vision is because of that, is because of the future that I'm seeing for my children and for the young generation in general. But again, when I think about sustainability and things like gender inequalities and what Mr. Ngari said, the tools that we have, I had mentioned earlier about the SDG Action Manager tool that we did in conjunction with the UN Global Compact. We have another tool called the B Impact Assessment tool that we use to help businesses who are for profit, because we consistently believe that businesses have the power, and this is what Mr. Chege said in the report, that businesses have the power to solve societal problems. And that is historically not what we have learned. Initially, we learned that businesses are here to make money. And so this systems change that we champion at B-Lab, and I champion as an individual, is my belief in the fact that, number one, business is here to stay. Number 2, business is good for society. And number 3, business is good for the future.
Edwin, do you have your final question?
Yes, I do. My final question goes to Mr. Peter Ndegwa. Well, 10 years is quite a journey. It's quite a journey, and as we all know, straight road do not make the best of drivers. So, what are the problems that you have faced in the course of your journey of making sure that the sustainable development goals are met, so that we as the future generation know what we're going to meet and what is going to be on our way?
Thank you, Edwin. I think it's a great question, and actually goes to acknowledge what Yvonne said earlier, that this is a journey. It's not about being perfect. It's a marathon, not a sprint. One of the key aspects of starting a journey is you recognize that you have a way to go, and if you keep that in mind, you'll always see problems as opportunity to improve, rather than as challenges that you see along the way. There has been challenges, whether those are socio-economic, like COVID. Of course, it disrupts how our planning, disrupts supply chain, and actually introduces risk and puts the business at risk. So the advantages of having a target, a goal, as Bonakariuki said earlier, is that you keep track of what the destination is, rather than lose track because those obstacles have come along the way. The second aspect is, of course, changes within the governance structures, whether that is on the board or on management. The way to sustain progress is to ensure that the company has a purpose, and we have always led from purpose of transforming lives, that transcends into the strategy that we have. The SDGs have been built into how we operate. So we transcend the individuals that are running the organization or are governing the organization, and the purpose becoming the guiding light. And then, of course, the third one is also partnerships with others, so that they keep us and they hold us to account. By producing a sustainability report, it means that you cannot hide. There is nowhere to hide.
Yes.
I know you guys do exams every day. I mean, when you do exams, you know the dashboard will come through. And because of that, it holds us to account, to remain true to what we commit.
Thank you for that, Peter. I would just like to, have one question from the Q&A from our virtual attendees. And I think I will direct this to all three of you, if you can. It's from Edward Mungai, who says, great job and keep it up. 10th Sustainability Report is not a small feat. I like the inspiration that you're providing to other businesses in the region. In my view, Edward says, we need to move from inspiration to action. Is this something that Safaricom can relate to? And if yes, what are some of the ways you plan to go about it? So Peter, I'll start with you, but I think we can hear from the rest as well. Moving from inspiration to action. Peter, I'll start with you.
Yes, thank you for that question. It's a great question, because many times we can talk about things, but it's actually about bringing it to life. Strategies are not about what we think; it's about what we do, and therefore, one of our big commitments and what we have learned, going back to Edwin's question, over the past 10 years, in implementing this journey of being a sustainable business, is doing things and course correcting when things don't happen. And every year we'll have clear milestones that we want to achieve. And Karen and Steve talked about some of the milestones that we have achieved through doing. One of the ways that we hold ourselves to account to doing is to translate the 9 SDGs into things that we can do every day. So whether that's on environment, you had Steve talking about our commitment to planting 5 million trees. By the end of this calendar financial year, we'll have done 1 million. So that will allow us to be on that journey. So it's actually putting very specific milestone that allows us to measure whether we are making that progress. And clearly, sometimes we are behind. And we have to acknowledge that we are behind and not use it as an excuse not to commit to doing.
Absolutely. Kariuki, inspiration to action.
Yeah, I think you can only inspire if you're doing. It's not possible to inspire if you're not doing it, because people can. I mean, it's not just coming and give some talk. You have to inspire to do. If I just give a few examples of what Standard Chartered has done in this space, if you look, for instance, in our head office building, we made a commitment that it's going to be single-use plastic free. And we've achieved that. It's completely single-use plastic-free, and we've started extending that to the rest of the branch network, and we should be able to complete this by the end of the year, certified. Not us saying it, but certified that single-use plastic is completely not in our domain at all. When you talked about the environment, some of the things that we're talking about, whether it's partnering, we are partnering with Kenya Forest Services in terms of what can we do more in the green spaces in Nairobi, and we've chosen Nairobi Arboretum. And there's some action that we are doing there. How can we help? Because we've seen, in terms of green spaces in Nairobi, how can we partner with the friends of Nairobi Arboretum so that we can start making it a place for recreation. People can go and run. That is something that we are really excited about. It's also being deliberate about a marathon, the Standard Chartered Marathon. We are working to make it a sustainable marathon, and there's quite a bit of work that is going to happen in that space to make it a real sustainable marathon. The partners, the suppliers, and then finally extending what we are doing to our suppliers as well. When you talk about the commitments we've made as a bank that will be net neutral by 2050 across our entire, even with our clients, but as a bank we want to be there by 2030. It's being very, very deliberate. So there are actions we are taking. It's only when you're taking those actions and doing them that you can inspire others to join you. You cannot just inspire without doing something. So for us, it's being very deliberate and saying these are the actions we are going to take every day, every year, and then making sure that for us, across our entire staff, 1,400 colleagues, they understand it and they live it every day, because that's what is going to make the biggest difference.
Inspiration through action. Gwing, you get the final word.
Thank you, Yvonne. Our core business actually is action, because we are in the business of supporting any for-profit business that wants to get on this journey. So throughout this year, we've been supporting 63 women-owned businesses outside of Nairobi, because a lot of time the concentration is here, in Machakos, in Murang'a, in Mombasa, in Kisumu, just to help them to say, okay, what does it mean to build from the ground up an impact-driven business model? And next year, we are going to work in partnership with World University Service of Canada. They are funding a program that allows us to help any organization that's having a challenge with gender inequality, or hiring persons with disabilities, or hiring youth, or hiring women, to help them say, okay, so what are the things that you can do in your company that create space for you to achieve this? And so those are the types of programs that we do, so that we can help more businesses get on this journey to achieve sustainability.
Indeed. Gwing Kimani, Peter Ndegwa, and Kariuki Ngare, thank you very much. But I really would like us to give our biggest round of applause to my co-moderators, Edwin Precious Tumaini and Marianne Gishoge, the leaders of the future. Asanteni sana.